Hi everyone, we're going to verify this trig identity by simplifying and multiplying by the conjugate. So the first thing I'm going to do is write this with parentheses right here, because what I want to do is multiply by the conjugate and use this form here. So when you do that, let's copy this down. You have 1 plus sine of theta plus cosine of theta. And then the denominator is going to be 1 plus sine of theta minus cosine of theta. You usually always multiply by the conjugate when you see this flip. The same thing, but you have a plus and a minus, basically. So we're going to multiply the denominator by the conjugate because we want to get sine here. And we need a cosine squared to give us 1 minus sine squared, because we just want a sine in the denominator. So it takes a while to get used to that, but the conjugate is just going to be 1 plus sine of theta plus cosine theta. And when you do that, you also have to multiply this by the numerator. So now what we're going to be dealing with is we're going to be dealing with this formula and this formula. The numerator is going to be this formula. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm foiling this. All right, or you can use the distributive property. So when you multiply these two, that's going to be this part. And that's going to be 1 plus 2 sine of theta plus sine squared of theta. And then you're going to multiply this, and you're going to get plus 2 cosine theta times 1 plus sine of theta. And then you multiply this last piece, and that's going to give you plus cosine squared of theta. So this middle piece was the outer and the inner. Now the denominator, we're using this formula. So that's this is your A and this is your B. So it's this squared. So you have to square the A. So square that. Get 1 plus 2 sine squared of theta plus sine squared theta. And then minus a cosine squared of theta. I'm just using that formula. So I squared this and I squared that. And when you square this, you have to expand it. Now, on the next slide, I'm going to copy this whole thing down. But what I'm going to do is change both of these cosine squares to 1 minus sine squared theta using my Pythagorean identity. So I'm going to copy the whole thing down with just that substitution. Okay, here we go. So that's going to be 1 plus 2 sine of theta plus sine squared of theta plus 2 cosine theta times 1 plus sine of theta. And it's going to be plus 1 minus sine squared of theta. And do the same thing for the denominator. So this before was our cosine squared. Now for the denominator, do the same thing. I'm writing exactly what I had before. But I subtract the cosine squared. So that's 1 minus sine squared of theta. All right. So simplifying the numerator, what we're going to get is we have 2 1s. So we get 2 plus 2 sine of theta. And then we have this here. So this is plus a negative. So basically what you're going to get is 2 cosine of theta times 1 plus sine of theta. All right? Now the denominator, when you do this, you're going to subtract the 1. So the 1's are going to cancel. And what you're left with is 2 sine of theta plus 2 sine squared of theta. Right, and this should have been, yeah, so that's what you have in the denominator. So what we can do is factor out some things. Let's look at the factoring out a 2 for this piece, and then factor out a 2 sine in this piece. So that's what I'm going to do on the next slide. So we're going to get 2 times 1 plus sine of theta plus 2 cosine of theta times 1 plus sine of theta divided by 2 sine, I'm factoring out a 2 sine of theta, 1 plus sine of theta. All right, I'm going to factor by grouping. So I have, this is the same. So I can factor by grouping and call this 2 plus 2 cosine of theta times 1 plus sine of theta. All right. Why did I put cosine? Oh, okay. Because I had a cosine here. All right. And then in the denominator, we still have 2 sine of theta, 1 plus sine of theta. The reason I did that, now this cancels. Now all I have to do is factor out a 2 from here. Let me see if I can squeeze in. If I factor out a 2, I'm going to get 1 plus cosine of theta divided by 2 sine of theta. So I think I can squeeze it in. The 2's cancel. So therefore you're left with this, which is our desired result. So this is one of those problems you kind of want to go slow on and be very careful with when you're simplifying. And look at each step. Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.